Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell coming to you live from OC Publishing headquarters here in little old Halifax, Nova Scotia. And welcome to this week's author journey. Every week we bring a new guest on to talk about all kinds of bookish things from the publishing business, from authors, publishers, editors, designers, and everything in between. So we're happy that you're here watching. And today, I'm very excited. We're going to delve into the mind and psyche of crime thriller author J.E. Friend, Janice, who I met first in 2017 when she came to the Paradise Writers Retreat. And at that time, she was working on her first novel, Design of Deception, which then released in 2020. She's written most of her life, but only recently decided to pursue the craft and write a novel. Her second book, it's behind me here, is the first in the Trans Canada Killer Trilogy. And she'll talk a little bit about what the trilogy entails and when the next one's coming out. The first one did launch in 2022. And she's originally from Ontario, but bought a home and moved to Nova Scotia in 2011, where she lives with her husband. And she's an active member of the National Novel Writing Month, which she'll talk a little bit more as the municipal liaison for NaNoWriMo, which we lovingly refer to it as. She has a bachelor's degree from Waterloo, where her focus was in psychology. So that was where she has decided to pull from that background when delving into the minds of her killers. What makes them tick? Was there trauma that set them on the direction to kill? To hone her craft, she's attended many workshops and retreats where authors feed off each other's energy and receive feedback from their work. So let's bring Janice up to talk about all of that exciting detail that goes into being a crime thriller writer. Welcome, Janice.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Nice to see you again.
Yes.
You've been on the author journey before.
I have, after Design of Deception came out.
That's exactly right. And really, really excited that the trilogy is moving forward and that we'll be seeing number 2 hopefully soon. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Why crime thrillers? Like, what is it that moved you to write that particular genre?
It's a bit unusual. I like blood and guts. I don't put as much in it in a book as I probably could, but I mean, I like things like forensic files and crime shows. Those are my go-tos. And I always jokingly say that having a killer in my book means I don't have to kill anybody for real.
I love it. Well,
my husband appreciates that, let me tell you.
I bet. And as a mystery writer, I write cozy mysteries. So, yes, I don't do as much of the psychological, blood and guts kind of stuff. But I do like to read that. A well-placed, really intricate murder scene is really quite gripping for me. So how does your mind go there? Like,
I always put myself in the character's head. So when I build a character, and multiple characters exist in both of my books, I try to remember who I am and how I would feel as that person. And I write out a whole description of who that person is. So when I'm building a character, I know what color their hair is, whether it comes into the story or not. I have all that. I know what trauma they may have experienced. And I think about people, if they are in a situation where they're going to kill somebody, how would they feel inside? What's the adrenaline happening? Is it something they've planned? So that's how I do it. And I think about how would I kill if I was going to kill somebody? Right? And there's many ways. Women typically go with poison, but I like things that are a little bit more violent, even if it's a woman. The woman.
And you actually, that's sort of what we call a trope, in the crime thriller genre is, the whole most women would use poison kind of idea. Yes. But, I always say when I do workshops and when we're talking about, the writing process, you might understand what some of these rules are. And I love what you were saying, that knowing the rules only means that you can choose when and how to break them, right? So I think,
That's right.
so your background, you have studied psychology.
Yes.
So when you were taking psychology courses, was there like an inkling in the back of your mind that you might eventually be a
Actually,
novelist?
I've wanted to be a novelist since I was in high school.
Mm,
Didn't take that path. I actually dealt with children. That was my career.
right.
Dealt with children and childcare.
Hmm.
But psychology was something that was important in that aspect of my world as well.
Hmm.
I do use it a lot when I'm writing books because it's helpful to have a bit of understanding of the psyche of the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. Are you in a position today to do a little reading from Redemption, if you have
Redemption.
it handy? So, oh, excellent. So
And
as you're kind of looking in there, I probably didn't give you much
oh,
warning, did I?
no, just
But
now.
I love, yeah, I think it would be really interesting for you to pick an excerpt to read, and especially for people who love crime thrillers, like they are truly. It's almost like a cult following.
Yes.
So, and I know that once a reader finds an author that they love, they always look for the other books that author has written.
I do the same thing myself.
Oh, me too. So anybody who's watching, if you haven't read either of Janice's books, Design of Deception or Redemption, which is the first in the Trans Canada Killer Trilogy, now's the time to get them under your belt before the number 2 in the trilogy comes out, which will be sometime this year, we hope.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us a little reading and see?
Okay. I'm going to read actually the first page of the book because I really
Okay,
love the way it starts.
excellent.
Brad Hopkins leaned back as he sat across the table from his young daughter and watched her finish the last of her milk with a satisfying slurp. He stifled a yawn behind his hand. After a full day of driving, he felt exhausted. The sensation set in like a soft blanket of fog on a wet day. What Brad needed was some long-awaited sleep. He thought of the comfortable bed waiting for him back in his rig and struggled not to yawn again. One thing was for certain: no matter how tired he was, he wouldn't rush his little girl to finish her meal. Being a truck driver meant they spent too much time apart while he traveled the road. These trips they took together meant the world to them both. Still, he couldn't prevent himself from yawning again and rolled his shoulders to loosen the tension in his neck. He looked into his daughter's eyes, noticing how heavy her lids were. For the first time, he realized she was as tired as he was and ready for bed. A last wave of exhaustion settled over him as he signaled to the server for the bill. While he paid for his dinner, there was 2 things he didn't know. One, before the night was over, he couldn't prevent the life-threatening injuries his little girl would sustain. And 2, he'd be dead before it happened.
Ooh, dun 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 dun.
That's why I had
Yay.
to do that.
Excellent. So actually that's a really great segue into my next question, or
Okay.
or observation as well. One of the things that I found truly fascinating about Redemption is just how cleverly you draw the reader into the life of the trucking world.
Okay.
I know for myself, I'm driving down the highway and, the 18 wheelers are buzzing by. And I always wonder, I've thought, geez, what does the back of the cab look like? And what do they do when they go to truck stops? So talk a little bit about the in-depth research that I know went into the preparation for writing this trilogy.
Yes. Well, first of all, my husband is a long haul truck driver, so I did
Mhm.
get a lot of information from him. But I also spent several 3-month tours in the truck, and all the things that come out about the back of the truck, about the bucket that they use in the middle of the night for women, for example. Different things like that that I include in the story are things that happened and went along with the story. When we researched it, I drove with him Newfoundland to Vancouver Island.
Wow.
Yes, and we did that more than once. And I wrote notes about the different truck stops because I wanted the truck stops to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Whether anything happened in a truck stop that was real or not, is besides the point. Is the trucks had to feel real. So that's what I did. And I'll tell you, it's a very small space to live in.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically 8 by 8, and that includes the beds, the front of the truck with the seats.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for the weak of heart.
No, and it's a very tight-knit community. So,
It is.
you tend to see some of the same faces at different truck stops, on your routes back and forth, right?
I made friends. I still have contacts from female truck drivers that I met as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We did what they call tailgating, where a group of truck drivers will all pack together and bring their barbecues out and put meals and combine that. We did that. That was a lot of fun.
That's
And
really
that
cool.
tried to include some of the real things like that in my book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at any kind of I want to say like a subset of the community of your regular day to day. So nobody would see the inside of that community unless they lived it
Yes.
or talk direct. So I think that you also had mentioned to me at one point that there were, of course, you blended some of the characters to create, some of the characters that you met to create ones, and that you shared with some of them some of the writing. Like, what was the response when you would share that?
I talked to some of the drivers because there were certain characteristics that were just too brilliant not to include, and it's not one person is actually drawn from, like, so it's not one character in my book that's from one particular person.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
it's blending of varying ones. And I spoke to several different drivers while I was doing this. I asked what they felt, how they thought about a book that was about them.
Mm-hmm.
The redemption is about a serial killer who is killing truck drivers
Mm-hmm.
along the Trans Canada Highway.
So it could be a little triggering for some.
I did have, after it was published, one of the female truck drivers I met bought it, read it, and loved it. She said it was so nice to see strong characters, female characters as well as male characters in the book.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the character, and again, very vibrantly described characters and quite intriguing. And one of them is what's commonly known as a lot lizard. Talk a little bit about the lot lizard.
wow. Now, there's certain aspects of that are actually of a lot lizard that I met on my travels. So a lot lizard is a woman who sexually services truck drivers for a fee. So a hooker. I did meet one. I've seen a lot, but I did meet one. And she does service a truck stop and she does ride a bicycle. And I thought that was the most fantastic thing in the world. Now, my character, Noelle, does not look a thing like this one, but I did think that was really neat that this woman would ride her bicycle out to the truck stop and visit
her regulars and some newcomers.
And I think in my book I say that she uses the showers to clean up. Well, that might have happened, but I didn't know anything about it. But I do know that because of her using the showers for other reasons, men and women are not allowed in the showers together anymore.
Oh dear. So I also wanted to say, if anybody is watching and has questions for Janice, then please do fire them in the comments. I want to say hi. Sue Slade just joined us. Hi, Sue, from Dartmouth Book Exchange. We're very, very happy to see some eyeballs out there. And if you're watching live, like I say, just pop in some comments or questions for Janice. Who was your favorite character in the book and why?
That well, of course I love Maggie. I
Mm-hmm.
really do. I love Maggie. And her physical appearance is actually fashioned after my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So that
And
was
just to clear, Maggie is the female truck driver
yes,
in the story. Yes.
female truck driver for the story.
Mm-hmm.
But I do really like Noelle too. I hate to say that. I
Mm-hmm.
really like Noelle. Um,
I liked her too. I mean, and like you said, she comes and goes on a bicycle, so it would be hard to get away quickly if anybody, didn't
yeah.
like what she was doing.
Um, I have another character that I really loved. I called JD.
Hmm.
Uh, he's he's a secondary character, but he's just so much fun. And
Hmm.
there's one catchphrase that he says that is actually from somebody else I met on the road. And I thought that catchphrase was so interesting. I even said to him, "Can I use it?" I even
Hmm.
asked the actual person, "Can I use it?" And he said,
Hmm.
"Is he going to be a bad guy?" I said, "No." He said, "Then it's all yours." And he said, "Well, that's a fine how do you do about all kinds of different things." And I just love that.
Yeah, I find that the dialogue is very believable. Things just, kind of move forward. It is a page turner, I'll have to say. So just give us a tiny little synopsis of the storyline. Um, and what is in number one and what we can expect in number two without any spoilers, no spoilers.
So the first story is about a uh, serial killer killing truck drivers across the Trans Canada Highway. You
Hmm.
do find out that the victims are not necessarily good people.
Hmm.
So that is something that sort of puts some people's mind at rest.
Hmm. A bit of a vigilante.
Vigilante, yes.
Hmm.
At the end of that story, I mean, you do have a lot of things that are happening that are outside of the killings. The killings are all individual scenes, and I try
Hmm.
to use locations
Hmm.
to indicate that you have a killing scene.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whenever as soon as you see a name of a town, you know somebody's going to die.
Yeah. So Sue asks, is it scary? I guess it depends on if you like a crime thriller. Um,
It's not scary like a horror book, but there is a bit of blood splatter. I mean,
mhm,
look at the cover.
mhm.
There's blood splatter on the cover.
Well, and I mean, I think also because you're delving into the mind of, the psyche of a serial killer. I was going to say psychopath, but the killer, I
Is not
don't think that is a valid description. But and again, I don't want to spoil anything. Um, but I think there might be some scary parts. There might be some triggering
I do
content.
I do have
Uh,
warnings in the book because of the certain things that are going
yeah. Sue asks, "Will I be able to sleep at night after reading it?" I think so.
on.
Yeah, because you're not sleeping in a truck stop. And you wouldn't be the typical target for this particular serial killer.
Exactly.
Right.
And there are most of the stories about Frank, Maggie, Noelle, Ryan, Audrey, and the detective.
Hmm. Yeah.
Audrey is a psychiatrist.
Right.
Um, and at the end of the book, you find out who the killer is, the
Hmm.
first book, and one of those main characters dies.
Hmm.
So that's what I will tell you. The second book picks up with the killer 5 years later,
Hmm.
and there's been a break in killing for 5 years after the final kill in the first.
Hmm. So they have not found the killer at this
No,
point.
the officer figured because somebody else was framed.
Okay.
Okay, so they just shut the case. Nobody else died after this, so
Hmm.
they shut the case. Nobody went to jail, but somebody died, and they figured that the dead person was the killer.
Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler.
Well, second book starts out 5 years later. The person has gone on to change a lot of things in their life.
Hmm.
Has stayed away from the trucking aspect,
Hmm.
chosen some different ways of making a living, we'll just say.
Hmm.
And then a trigger happens again. There's always a trigger. So
Okay.
that sends the killer after a new
New
person and group of people.
target. Okay. Well, I don't want to spoil it, and I think that's perfect, and not like a good amount to keep people intrigued and to pick up their copy of Redemption before the next one comes out. So Sue says, I liked her first book. Yay.
Okay.
Redemption, the Trans Canada Killer Trilogy is very different. Very, very different. But very good. Right now, Redemption is my favorite. So we'll wait and see. And of course, they're probably all together,
Yeah.
will constitute sort of an entity. Would you say that you would need to read the first one before you read the second one?
Well, it's always advisable, but I do give a bit of back history for those
Okay.
who don't. My intention is that they can have a bit of a standalone,
Mm-hmm.
but if you want to know how the person got there, you need to read one to go to two to three.
Right, right.
So that's the idea. That's why there'll be a bit of backstory
Okay.
that anyone who doesn't pick up the first one first.
Yeah. Let's talk just a little bit about point of view before we delve into National Novel Writing Month. You mentioned that collection of characters, I think it was 6 or 7,
Yep, six.
that all have a point of view in the book. Um, that can be confusing, but I will say that the way that it's written, and because the chapter heading are headed with that particular character's name, whose point of view you're in. What made you choose to write the story that way?
When I first started working on my characters and getting to know my characters, I started labeling the chapters with their names so
Hmm.
that I could figure it out who I wanted to do what and what
Hmm.
part they're going to play in the story. Um, and as I continued on, I thought, well, this just helps keep it straight. Everyone
Hmm.
knows who everybody is.
Hmm.
Uh, I added characters. Originally, I didn't have the psychiatrist, and then I realized I needed her.
Hmm. Yeah,
In
I found. Yep.
you
Yeah.
know, um, it's just like in the next book, somebody who dies. I wasn't expecting to die. My gosh, I have to kill that person. And it wasn't supposed to happen originally. There was another ending that person had a happy ending at the end, but no, not anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a really great point. And for people who are watching who are authors, they're all doing this. And, people who are avid readers may not know that about, an author's process.
Mhm.
And sometimes you have one idea and then your characters wind up saying, no, that's not happening, right?
And the next book, I don't have it independent points of view because the story focuses mostly about the killer this time.
Okay. So pretty much from the killer's point of view.
There will
Oh,
be
that's cool.
a few chapters where you're going over to the cop and yada yada, but
Hmm.
you'll know as soon as you do because it'll talk about him.
Okay, so you're alternating between the killer's point of view and the detective.
Yes.
So the killing starts up again 5 years later, and the MO looks the same. Oh my goodness, I love this stuff. I watch Criminal Minds. I watch Law and Order, all of them. Closer, all that kind of stuff. So let's shift a little bit. And I know because of the first Paradise Writers Retreat that you attended. Following that, National Novel Writing Month became quite central to you moving forward. Talk a little bit about that and
Okay.
why.
So you were actually mentioned National Novel Writing Month, actually otherwise known as NaNoWriMo.
Hmm.
I'd never heard of it. So I went and investigated and decided I was going to participate. So National Novel Writing Month is the month of November, and you have to write 50,000 words in 30 days. Works out to be 1,667 words a day.
That's how I wrote my first novel.
And that's how I got Design Deception going.
Yep.
I didn't think I could write that fast or that surprised me. And I had a lot of expectations on what it would be. There were talks about all these events. There was nothing in my area. And then I found out why we didn't have a municipal liaison. So
Hmm.
I stepped up and I said, I'll do that. And I've hosted launch things. I've hosted trainings about how to put ideas down for new writers. And I've done encouragement. I do encouraging emails to anyone who is in the National Novel Writing Month throughout the month. It's changed a lot since COVID, mind you, but I've also done Zoom meetings where we've done Zoom write-ins, which has worked quite well. I had somebody sitting in her car. She was out on break and wanted to participate.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know what, that's so Janice, because, you know, you when you get involved in something, you're all in 150%. And, you know, part of it might be a little your political background, because you were mayor,
Deputy mayor.
deputy mayor for how long?
Oh, I was the last deputy mayor of my town before
That
we
has
before
amalgamated, right?
yes. Yes,
Mhm,
I was the
mhm.
last deputy mayor. The election was 2012, and I think we had amalgamated by 2015, so it was a very short term, but yes.
Right. And what town was that?
Bridgetown.
Bridgetown. Yeah.
Bridgetown up the road.
So I can envision, like, down the road, once you're finished Trans Canada Killer Trilogy, that there might be a political thriller.
There might be. There might be. It's definitely more of small town politics rather
Mhm.
than big city,
Of course.
you know, because
Yes.
that's I know big city politics. I know small town politics,
Mhm. Well,
and
that's
there's a lot
awesome.
of stuff.
There's yeah, I think you've had a lot of material there. So talk a little bit about, so we started talking about NaNoWriMo with the what triggered it, and that was at the Paradise Writers Retreat in 2017. And you have been a participant ever since, every year except one, when you became a grandma of twins. Congratulations. And it's so nice that these retreats have become a go-to and something to look forward to for really a core group of people. Tell me what it is about, not necessarily just the Paradise Writers Retreat, but a writers retreat in general, that you find beneficial.
One of the biggest thing is having yourself surrounded by like-minded people.
Hmm.
I belong to a writers group here too, and we feed off each other. We read stories. When I attended my first one with you, I'd never read aloud to anybody other than, regular books, but nothing that I'd actually written. I'd never let
Hmm.
them see what I'd written, except for high school stuff, but that was different.
Hmm.
Um, and it was very opening to me to do that.
Hmm.
And if you and Barb, who's another member of the Paradise Writers, noticed that from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, I evolved a lot.
Blossomed.
Yes. Writing, I was giving advice to new people, helping out, demonstrating things that I've learned along the way. Uh,
Hmm.
so that to me is what it's all about. And having a good time with
Hmm.
people who, again, all like to write.
Hmm. Yeah. And creating those great memories and things to pull from. And I want to acknowledge Hank Sawchuk says, I'm watching Janice.
Ah,
Thanks for joining us, Hank. And Sue says, we're looking forward to carrying the Trans Canada Killer books. So we'll have to get some
I
into her hands.
I will make sure I get that done after the snow goes, though, because I have to come all the way to Halifax.
Right, right. This has been a brutal couple of months, although we really can't complain too much, can
No,
we?
I'll say the winter's been a brutal couple of days.
It has. Well, do you know what? It's hard to believe, but we're already at our time. I would like to tell everybody that we do have another retreat scheduled for this year. And
Sweet.
I was looking forward to it. Yay! October 29th to November 2nd. So watch all of OC Publishing social media and on the website for more details. And Janice, do you have any final words of advice for your fellow writers out there, whether they're crime thriller writers or anything else?
When you really want to get something done, put yourself in NaNoWriMo mind, because then you get a lot done. I'm planning to do that in April for my third book.
Wow, that's terrific.
1,000 words in that month.
So you're putting yourself in NaNoWriMo mindset for April, and that mindset means button chair, daily word count, that,
Daily
target.
to hit that 50,000 target, because then I can start working on the edits afterwards.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that's great advice. And we'll get you back here when the next one comes out, number 2. So do you have a title for number 2?
I had one, but I'm changing it, so I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly yet. But
Stay
it'll
tuned.
begin with an R. How's that?
Stay tuned. So if anyone wants to reach out to you or follow you on social, can they find those links on your website, jefriend.com? Or
Can. All the
okay. And
there.
what other where else can they find you?
I'm on Facebook. I don't do a lot of Twitter, but I do Instagram.
Okay, Facebook and Instagram. And I think it's J.E. Friend Author on Facebook, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, if anybody out there wants to reach out to Janice, and oh, you know what? I also want to share. These are the 2 books. Here are her 2 books. And they're also, all of her books are also on Amazon. So have a look, support your indie authors, and we'll just keep on spreading the word and sharing our news on new books coming out. So thank you so much for joining me, Janice. It's been such a pleasure, as always. And we'll get you back here when number 2, the Trans Canada Killer Trilogy, that's a tongue twister, comes out. So thank you everyone for joining us this week on the author journey, and thank you J.E. Friend for sharing her insight into writing crime thrillers and just what goes into National Novel Writing Month. Again, I'm Ann O'Connell with OC Publishing, and we'll hope to see you next week on the author journey. Bye for now.